15th is National School Psychology Week. We appreciate our school psychologists. We have a number who really help us on a daily basis. November 13th was World Kindness Day. November 21 is National Parent Involvement Day, and November 22 is National Substitute Educators Day. Really important recognitions this month, so we've recognized those.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. We appreciate that. State cross country. Brad Shelton.
Good evening. Tonight, I'd like to recognize our state cross country athlete, Midway High School senior Caleb McCarver. Caleb, if you come on up. Caleb is coached by our head boys cross country and head boys track coach John Capron. Coach Cap, will you come up as well for the photo?
Yay, Coach.
Caleb competed at the UIL State 6A cross country meet earlier this month, placing 84th out of 151 of the top high school runners in the state of Texas with a 5K time of 16:24. Congratulations, Caleb.
And next, significantly, the National Merit and College Board National students. Allison Smith.
Good evening, members of the board and all of our honored guests tonight. Students at Midway High School continue to uphold their legacy of outstanding performance in standardized testing. Tonight, we celebrate 22 students who've earned recognition through the National Merit Scholarship Program and College Board National Recognition Programs. This year's honorees include 2 National Merit semifinalists, 3 National Merit Commended Scholars, and 17 students recognized by one or more of the College Board National Recognition Programs that include National African American, Hispanic, Indigenous, and First-Generation Scholars. Over 1.3 million high school juniors entered the 2025 National Merit Scholarship Program, and Midway semifinalists rank among the top scoring students in Texas, representing fewer than 1% of high school seniors nationwide. Students, when I call your name, please come forward to receive your certificate and a special treat, and please remain standing at the front until all names are called for a big group photo. So, I know, it's fun. This is fun. So our first 2 are our National Merit semifinalists, and so I have Alistair McGrath. Come on up. And also Ty Rowan fans. Next are our National Merit Commended Scholars, and I have Esther Kim, and Esther also received a perfect score on the ACT. And Lucy Liu. Alistair McGregor. College Board National Recognition Program Scholars. This is Julia Baheeler. Zoe Betances. Next is Jimena Bustamante. Anthony Espinosa. Jameson Garcia. Axton Georges. Riley Graham, and I don't believe they were able to be here tonight. Yeah. Anna Hoppy. Yeah, I love so many. It's great. Next up is Gabriel McEwen. Gabriel. What's he looking for? Yay. Okay, good.
Teamwork.
Next up is Mercy Odedeji. Sarah Asakara. Camille Panconian. Callista Pantos. Tristan Perot. Next up is Stella Raimondo. And we have two more. We have Jude Turner. And Mason Willis. Congratulations.
Parents, I know y'all want to get pictures. I'm gonna move them around so we get them all together, so y'all have taken lots of pictures in your school years. Can I get some of you to step forward and some of you to go in the back? Let's get small ones in the back, short ones in the front.
You know who you are.
So. We're gonna center up right here, so just step forward. And if I could get the three of you to back up in the back, you can stay up for the end, Stella. Let's scoot over and fill in a little bit. There, you stay right there. There. Is this the most we've had so far?
This is the performance part of the
Yes.
FAQ.
Now y'all get close to each other. Okay. If I can't see you, then the camera can't see you, so scoot over a little bit that way. Second one right here, perfect, perfect. Young lady in the black dress. Actually, can you come on this side right over here next to Stella? There we go, scoot over a little bit, there we go, okay. I cannot see these two here, so let's switch with, Alistair. Yes, the young lady. And then let's, just take a step up right there. There you go. Okay. This isn't nearly as hard as they were together, right? That's right. Okay, I'm gonna take on picture 1, 2, 3, then we're gonna wait a few minutes. Just stay where you are so that your parents can come up and get photos too, because I know they all love it as well. Ms. Watts, would you like to get in the photo? We're going to stand on this side right over here. Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3. A couple more. 3. Long step over. Paparazzi guys.
All right, thank you.
Congratulations again to all our students tonight. We're very proud of you. It's an open meeting. Y'all are welcome to stay, but we're going to pause briefly for those that have better things to do on this nice November evening.
22.
Yeah, that's
I'm
impressive.
impressed. Awesome. All the languages today. It's cool. It came back on. It was fine for a while. Now it's back on. They keep rolling. No, it shapes the other. That last piece, like a shape like that, and rolls as it rolls over and over. They have the shape. See, and I wish I could, because that's what I wanted. Oh, okay.
I didn't dress up.
Gold off and use that, melt it around. Can
I wear your jacket?
Yes.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think that's.
Start here, start with Brad.
You could put that on the chin.
Did you get me just punching Brad?
He
usually does.
Yeah. I never had a boyfriend.
Kick him in the knee, hit him in the shoulder.
It's cool.
That's good. Could be worse.
First thing other than still counts on us is the one Evan just handed over. Today was her birthday.
We were pitching crews over.
Yeah, they were afraid they were going to have to ever
So, yeah. Eddie was like, that's better than mine, so. Maybe it was about 2 days.
Yes, they found an email.
Okay, anybody have any questions on our information item?
Got it when they, it was
And if not, then we're going to move on to our presentation discussion items, the first one of which is our annual financial audit report. We have our auditor from the firm of Patillo Brown and Lee here, Clayton Rogers. I would never have guessed out of this crowd that would have been you standing back there. Clayton, welcome. Appreciate you being
Thank
here.
you. Good to be here. I appreciate it. Did I break something already? Oh, I didn't know how to clicker. Bonus. Well, thank y'all very much for having me here. I'm here to talk about the results of the fiscal year 24 audit. So you should all have copies of a separate letter that we'll go over to you, the board, and then a copy of the district's annual financial report. Right there on the cover, you'll notice things are a little bit different this year. With the district changing its fiscal year end, it's for the 10 months ended and not the whole fiscal 12 months ended, which really was probably more work for us drafting this document. There was a lot of find and replace in Excel and Word, replacing the year ended with the 10 months ended. But fortunately, at the end of the day, that was about the worst and hardest thing about this, at least from our perspective. Just to kind of give you a good idea at a high level, it really, despite all of that, there are some changes that are in the financials and that are differences in how the district keeps its books. But at the end of the day, really, for us, it was a pretty straightforward audit year. It is a clean audit opinion. There were no findings and really no significant issues to report. And so while the district did put a lot of work in to get some of those things changed over to where they needed to be, I'm happy to report that from our perspective, it was really smooth sailing. And I guess before I go any further, I'll thank Wesley and his staff. I am here to tell you that school finance, if you were wondering, has not gotten any easier in the last year.
Don't say.
But Wesley and his team do a great job, and they were super helpful, and everything was right on time, and we are happy to have gotten everything about as done as smoothly as audits ever go, and they do a great job, and we appreciate them. So if you'll open with me in the annual financial report to page 2. Page 2 is the reason we're all here, or at least the reason I'm here. It's the independent auditor's report. And so just a refresher on the audit process, we don't look at every dollar. We don't look at every transaction. We're going for a high level of assurance that's not absolute, that the financial statements in front of you are materially correct. So that doesn't mean perfect. Like I said, we don't look at every dollar. Wesley would probably kill us if we were out in his office long enough to look at that level of detail. Really what we're looking for is, when we say materially correct, is what would influence decision making. So what, if there was something in these financial statements that the district puts out that if it were incorrect or omitted or misleading, what would affect the decision making of people who are using this document? That would be mainly yourselves, TEA, and probably, perhaps most importantly, your bondholders. So it's a fairly high level, but there is a lot that goes into it. Third-party confirmation, analytical work, all sorts of various procedures. And right here at the top of page 2, the auditor's report does list that we are giving an unmodified opinion on the financials. That's a clean audit opinion, so of the 4 conclusions that we can render based on our audit, that's the best one. And it means that based on all of the work we did this year for our audit, we do believe that these financial statements in front of you are free of material misstatement. And so we don't give out letter grades, but I'd forgive you for it feeling like an A. The rest of our auditor's report goes through a lot of what I was just describing in a little bit more detail. It talks about some pieces of this report that we either didn't audit or provide a little less assurance on. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this report reads pretty much exactly like last year, except for the fiscal year verbiage changing. I'll mention there's several other auditors' reports in the very back of this document that relate to certain compliance with federal grants. We do actually a separate audit and render a separate opinion over some of those federal grants. We pick a few grants and do a deep dive based on certain criteria that the federal government gives us. Again, not absolute assurance, and we're going for material compliance, so not all compliance. But at the end of the day, we were able to render an unmodified opinion there as well. So from our perspective, it was as clean as an audit can get. And they're really, one of the questions we always get is, well, okay, there were no audit findings, but what do we really need to know about? And what's really going on that you didn't put in writing in here? And I can honestly say that there's really not anything to even talk about. I think from our perspective, it's something that there are certainly a lot of challenges in school finance, and especially with a lot of the fiscal challenges that many districts are facing. We think about what kind of incentives there are, or pressures that would be in the school finance environment, but really nothing that Midway is doing or that the business office is taking care of that is any cause of concern from our perspective. So as the CPA who helped put this document together, I would love to give you the 5 minutes per page version of these financial statements. But I don't want to put anyone to sleep. I already chased a bunch of people off once they were about to start talking about the audit, and there we go. So there is a lot of information in this annual financial report, and I would say that this isn't, while this is the end of the audit, this document is just a starting point for decision making. And so it's not something that necessarily needs to be looked at once, but that you can take with you, refer back to. Especially the notes to the financials, there's a lot of detail about virtually every type of asset or liability that the district has. It has descriptions of property taxes, foundation revenue, so on and so forth. So while I'm not going to cover most of that, I'll just hit a couple of highlights that I wanted to point out. There is a lot of that information that is there. And as I wrap up, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have had while you were reviewing a draft of the report. So if you open with me to page 16. Page 16 is the 16 and 17 is what we would call your income statement for your governmental funds. So you can see the general fund and the debt service fund, your capital projects and your ESSER 3 funds, those are kind of theirs. This is a new thing this year they call ghost columns. Don't think they had made government financial statements complicated enough yet, so they make us throw kind of half columns in there since we moved them to the back this year. So your general fund and debt service fund, the income statement is presented here, and then all your other funds are rolled up into one presentation. And there's a couple of things I'd like to point out here. Above all, the thing I'd like to emphasize is that really there's nothing here that should be a surprise or is really way different than what you've been seeing or hearing up to this point. As I mentioned, the district's financial records were in great shape, and it's not a situation where there were really any major adjustments needed to get us to this point. It was really just making some topside changes here and there to get the information fed into the report, but not like the auditors were having to propose a bunch of big adjustments. So what you've probably heard about fund balance and some of those things really is not any different here than the way they were throughout the year. So you can see on page 16, the net change in fund balances for the general fund and debt service are right next to each other. General fund added about 5.4 million, and the real eye popper for me, the debt service fund, ending fund balance was working on quadruple what it was last year. And I want to point this out because while it was for us a pretty regular audit year, there are a couple of things related to the fiscal year change that you'll see in this document, and this is probably the biggest one. Because of certain expenses are on a kind of a monthly basis, and so when you have a 10-month stub period, you really do have 10/12ths of what you had last year. But there are certain things, primarily property taxes, the district's foundation revenue, teacher salaries, that's really all in there still. And you can see for the debt service fund, the district pays, I believe it's February and August, if memory serves, is when all of its bond payments are made. Well, now, usually you've got the February and the August bond payment in one fiscal year. Well, for this 10-month period, the August bond payments hadn't happened yet, but you've gotten the whole year's worth of property taxes. So from now until kind of forever, until it's spent down, the debt service fund does have a much higher fund balance, and it kind of that's kind of to be expected. So it doesn't really mean that anything is way out of whack. It's just a consequence of that fiscal year change there. The other thing that I would like to point out, really the only thing that kind of was a little adjustment that we landed on as we were putting this document together. In the general fund, just above that net change in fund balance, there's the insurance recovery for about $1 million for some roof repairs that were needing to be made. That's also going to help increase fund balance, but the thing to understand is that it was just something we landed on that we think for this document, it really needed to be recognized, even though you're not spending those proceeds until fiscal 25. So that was an increase to fund balance, but that it's going to come right back out. So that would probably be perhaps the one real significant difference from this document to what was being seen previously. But that it's not something really that we think skews the results or is going to change things really drastically from where they are. So again, there's a whole lot of other information I could go into, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. But in conclusion, it was a great audit for us. We appreciate all the district's help, and I'd be happy to cover any other questions that you might have.
Questions from the board for Clayton?
Well, I don't know if these are really for Clay or for Wesley, but in this report at the back where you have new accounting standards, you mentioned the 3 GASB statements that says we have not yet implemented at the district.
Those are not yet effective.
Okay. Well, one of them says December 15th, 2023. So.
And I believe there may have been a typo in there.
And then one June 15th, 2024 after that one. So that would be next year. Report. Right, but yeah, but if our year was.
Yeah, it's fiscal reporting periods beginning after.
24.
So that then the fiscal year period for you guys that begins after 12/15/23 is 7/1/24, which is the fiscal year you're in right now.
Oh, okay.
And I don't even get me started on the way they word those. It confuses me too.
Okay. Okay, good. So we're not really behind on
No,
doing all these
absolutely
things.
not.
We'll have them done this next year, basically, and next year. Okay. That was it. Thank you.
On the revenue report that we're looking at, I'm assuming the other middle column is our food service fund, is that right? Or is there something else I'm missing?
That's
It's
what I
everything
thought.
else, food service, Title I, IDME, all,
Together.
yeah, all those
Okay,
federal and
I got
state
you.
grant
Yes.
funds.
'Cause it looks like a big number for food service, so that makes sense. Okay.
There is a schedule, a set of schedules in the back that breaks that all out.
I'll find it one day.
Anybody else? All right, Clayton, we have this on the consent agenda for board approval, potentially. We appreciate you being here this evening. My apologies, I think I said Patilla, Brown, and Lee, but it's still Patilla, Brown, and Hill, right?
Yes, sir.
My apologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Following up, monthly finance report. Wesley.
All right, good evening, members of the board. On page 94 of the board packet, you'll see the beginning of our financial report for the month of October. On page 95, our statement of revenues and expenditures. You can see our amended budget, so including all the amendments up to this month. We have a deficit budget of $2.4 million. We've spent 34% of our budget through the month of October. As compared to last year, through 4 periods, we spent 36%. So we're trending well on our expenditures. We do have enrollment reports included in this month's packet, beginning on page 99. We have the enrollment of grade spans for the high school, middle school, and elementary enrollment at the first of each month for September, October, and November. As you kind of look through those pages, so with district enrollment has decreased 39 students from last year at this time. Elementary is up 9, middle school no change, and high school is down 48 students. So really pretty flat as compared to last year. Also, we have on the following page, we have our first 6 weeks ADA reports. So you can see on page 103, our ADA for the first 6 weeks was 8,313. And last year, the first 6 weeks was 8,312, so virtually identical. Our enrollment, like I said, is a little bit down, but our attendance percentage for the first 6 weeks at the bottom of that page, you can see was 97%. So that's really, really high, higher than we've had since before COVID. As you know, since we've returned back from COVID, our attendance percentage has never really hit what it was pre-COVID. We were trending, for the year 96.6, 96.7. In these last couple of years, we're a little under 96. So that's a good sign to see 97% for our first 6 weeks. We also have a couple of budget amendments. In the consent agenda 25-5 is to provide funds for the purchase of 3 special education buses. Remember, we already did purchase some from Pflugerville ISD. So it's rare to find used buses that are in good shape. Usually you buy them new and they're pretty expensive, and you run them until they're virtually worthless. But Pflugerville had some extra buses in their fleet. Their enrollment actually is kind of going down, and so it's really good opportunity for us to get 3 new to us special ed buses for a really good price. And I was talking to Ken earlier, and I think this actually enables us to remove all of those 2013 buses that we purchased in that bond package off of just daily regular routes, and which is a good thing. Those, because not only because of age, but those particular buses were kind of breaking down a lot. We're having some mechanical issues, so we feel good about getting those replaced. And Budget Amendment 25-6 is to reverse a previous amendment, 25-1, at the first of the year for the insurance proceeds. As Clayton mentioned earlier, we're making an audit adjustment to recognize those proceeds in fiscal year 24. So any questions?
Wesley, can you refresh our memory, if you have this number handy, what difference makes to our annual income when that attendance moves by a percentage point? How much is that in dollars in income, do you know?
I'd have to run the numbers again, but I know even just 0.5% is hundreds of thousands. So it's significant.
Yeah.
So even with flat enrollment or even declining, I mean, you can really make up for a lot of that loss with attendance percentage.
So long as we are funding based on attendance and not enrollment, a percentage point is a big deal.
It is, yes.
Yeah. So if we're going to pay our teachers, we got to keep our kids in the classroom.
Other questions? Thank you, Wesley. Appreciate that. Proposed, emphasis on proposed calendar for next school year, 2025-2026. Dr. Odejima.
How are we going to stump Becky tonight?
We're not on this one.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about calendar, even though it is November and we are talking about next August. We have begun putting together some information to look at drafts for next year's calendar. So we bring it to you tonight to present the process thus far and let you have the opportunity to look at this now and think it over and then ask any questions, and then we'll bring it back for recommendation for adoption next month. So tonight, to present the process that we proceeded with for our calendar, we began this in October, where we started asking district administrators, principals, directors, coordinators about calendar needs and things that they would consider revamping our current calendar for next year. We brought that calendar to several different committees, and then we began looking at a draft calendar that would be similar to the current year and include all of the needed holidays and minutes and requirements that we have to do by either teacher contract or by law for student attendance. And so we started with that draft, and then we launched a poll to Parent Square for both staff and parents to chime in on things that they believe we should consider as we develop next year's calendar. So we got that trend data, and you'll see that tonight, and then disaggregated all of that information with some very cool AI tools, and then moved forward presenting a proposed calendar, a draft calendar to the exec team, teaching and learning directors, principals, directors, coordinators, and then also had MAST look at it. So we had a singular draft at that time, and then based on that feedback, we developed 3 versions of that draft that would still meet all the criteria. So tonight, we present that information to you, and then we'll get your feedback, and then we'll send it out again December 2nd. For employees to look at that and then vote on a preference, and then we'll bring that preference to you next board meeting on December 17th. So we rolled out a poll via Parent Square. We had great responses, 535 total. 71% of those represented parent responses, and then the nearly 30% were our staff responses. It was a really great breakdown, I thought, of campuses. I think it represented the population on those campuses quite well, so I feel like we heard from a majority of people, or at least a good spread of the individuals that would have an opinion about that from all campuses and areas. And the things that we saw this time are things that have kind of become historic trends. We want really, this is our holiday calendar. It's our vacation calendar in many ways. Full weeks at Thanksgiving, 2 weeks for the winter break, and before Memorial Day, consider an early fall break, a late winter break, align with the Baylor and MCC holiday calendars if possible. And then there were many recommendations to duplicate our current year calendar again next year. So that was exciting. As far as like instructional and academic considerations that came through, that weren't necessarily related to those holidays, we wanted to find a balance between fall and spring semesters. Fall is usually always shorter because of the start date in August and then the breaks that we take there for holidays. There was a strong feeling that we needed, if we were going to sacrifice one of the 3 6 weeks that happened in the fall semester, that the shortest one should be the first one, and that's reversed on this year's calendar. So we were strong opinions about that. They want first day of school on a Wednesday or later so that we can acclimate to that school routine again for all of our students, particularly our elementary students. We needed time in August for new and returning staff to be there together for some extended time. Professional learning provided closer to the date of the actual classroom implementation, so that helps a lot when we put those August PD days in. We wanted, and you may remember this from last year, we moved some of our professional learning requirements in the summer to August because we didn't have all of our professional staff hired before closer to the start of school. So it was important for us to move some of those training opportunities closer to the start of school so we know we were closer to fully staffed. And that stands true still today as far as a need goes. We wanted time for both professional learning and then also teacher work days in their room prior to the start of school. So that's important. We've included that. And then opportunities for ongoing professional learning opportunities, and then these work day opportunities throughout the school year. So you'll see that in the drafts that we've created. So in all of the drafts, they all include the required at least 75,600 minutes of instruction. In fact, we've got at least a day of banked minutes in addition to that with the current calendar. That's important for a couple of reasons. Should we have a delay in the start of school one day and need to do a 2-hour delay, it wouldn't impact us. We would have those minutes banked. Or should a pipe burst at one of the schools before the start of school, then we would not have to have that campus come in and have extra time. Theoretically, yeah, just if you could imagine. So that's important to have a bit of a buffer. They also include 2 bad weather days. What we learned during Snowvid is that the districts are required to have 2 days, and then after that, there's usually a waiver that you get from the state when many schools miss many days because of something like a prolonged bad weather cause. They require you to use your 2 bad weather days, and then you have a waiver for days beyond that. So we don't necessarily have to have more than 2 in the calendar, so we have those 2, should we need them. And then beyond that, if it happens as it has before, we would get a waiver for any additional days that we were out if it was a widespread outage. All days or all drafts include those requested holiday breaks. So we've been able to work those into all of these calendars. They all have a start date for midweek, so we know that's important. They have time in August to help teachers prepare with both professional learning and then also those work days in the classroom. So very similar, you'll notice, to last year's August calendar. We added 1 more day for new staff and took 1 day away from all staff. The day we took away for all staff, we ended up putting in the calendar in May. So we've moved that to help us front load with May and then provide a break in the midst of a 7-week continued ongoing no break period. So there is 1 day in May, and I'll tell you a little more about that in a minute, but those are similar in all the calendars. And we've talked about the reason that's a consideration for those days at the beginning of the year to train returning staff with new staff and then also allow for time in classrooms. Another similarity is that those PD days are embedded throughout the school year. We think it's important. The places that they've been embedded are at the end or beginning of 6-week terms, so it's a nice break in instructional units and time, and they fall well usually around a holiday of some sort as well, so we've been able to embed that and try to make that possibly extend a student and family holiday, but also give us time at the end of a grading period to give teachers more time to refresh any training that they need refreshing on, but also to plan ahead for the next upcoming instructional sessions. These are considerations we always want to think about when we're talking about professional development. We know that ongoing, job-embedded professional development is the most impactful. It's also impactful when teachers are able to do it together, and it relates to their actual real-world experience, and it also happens with their peer group that they're going to carry out instruction alongside. So all of those things are allowed for if we do those days throughout the school year for professional learning. Some of the differences you'll see, what we're posing to teachers is the opportunity for us to have a fall break that is a Friday-Monday break. That Monday is Columbus Day. Or a couple of years ago, we did a Monday-Tuesday fall break. That has some advantages in that, first, instead of having multiple interrupted shorter weeks within a month, this only has, the second choice there only has 1 interrupted week. So teachers could carry out regular 5-day instructional weeks if we put that on a Monday, Tuesday, and then they just have that 1 week that is out. The other thing, that second example there is also a community and high school friendly calendar, because you know that the month of October there are many activities that happen on Friday nights, but also on Saturdays. Many of our groups have performance things that they attend on Saturdays. So when we take a Friday, Saturday break, many of our students and staff are going to be at school anyway. So it's not truly a break where that Monday, Tuesday might have more opportunities for that.
And they'll be tired.
Yes. And it was actually teacher staff that had that idea. So I'm excited to propose that to our
Yes.
teachers and see what they think about that holiday.
That's very helpful.
There's another, a day that we have some discretion over, whether we do it the last day of the 6 weeks in October for a break, which is what we did this year, or we do it the first day in November, the first day of that new grading period. We'll give teachers some options on that. The concern that we had originally with October 31st is that that is the PEAMS student snapshot date where they collect our attendance data. But we've learned from TEA and Region 12 that we can name October 30th as our snapshot date. So it won't interfere if we choose to move forward with the 31st.
Okay.
There is one change to a holiday type, and that is this new staff development / student bad weather makeup day. The teachers needed a work day in order to include 187 days in their contract days. So the teachers will come to school on May 1st, and the students will not unless we need the minutes for a bad weather day. So teachers would attend no matter what, and then students would come if we need the time for students. Teachers would be at work anyway, and that's part of their contract day. So that's why that ended up there. Traditionally, I've left the day on the 26th, the day after Memorial Day, for a bad weather makeup day. But I think we know that should we ask students to come the day after Memorial Day, our attendance would not be normal.
Yeah.
So to put that on May 1st is great. The only holiday break prior to that May 1st date is the Easter break that happens in very, very early April this year. So this was an opportunity for us to have a reprieve right after the end of STAR testing season, just before AP testing starts, to give teachers a work day to kind of collect things and get things ready. And then if we have to have kids come in for a makeup date, we can still do that. Staff will still be there. But it was a nice break, and it gives our kids a break so they're not in school 6 to 7 weeks straight without some kind of break.
Gotcha.
So, next steps for us is to take feedback from you or answer any questions that you have, either tonight or this week through email, and then to launch these drafts to our MISD employees to let them vote on their preference. And then, December 17th, we would bring that back for approval from you guys. So, that said, are there any questions or thoughts that you want to talk about tonight?
Well, slicing the calendar is never an easy job. And I wanted to commend you and everybody involved. When the matter is complex, we got to look at it from multiple perspectives. And I don't know how many other different ways you could have looked at it, but what you did, and having you outline all of the process was not only thorough, but really helpful. And I just appreciated seeing what went into the thinking of how we're going to get to the calendar we got to. That was really comprehensive. So, well done.
Thank you.
All three of these have a projected graduation date of May 22nd, then that Friday. That's
Right.
the same as we always do. Okay.
Right, before Memorial Day?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I don't get to hand out diplomas on my birthday.
Not this time.
Actually, that was really neat.
Anything else?
I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
We didn't get to stump Becky.
Maybe she'll be back up.
I knew we wouldn't on this one.
We'll make it extra hard in December. Legislative priorities.
Yes, sir. So I'm going to talk to you about legislative priorities. Emily's currently filming. But anyway, she's done a lot of work on putting these together and giving them to you in the draft form that you have. But there's been a lot of thinking that's gone into this, really by the whole exec team and others, frankly. So if you'll look at your board packet starting on page 122, that was where we started the conversation. This is not our legislative priorities, but it's the first draft that we sort of provided the board, and we received quite a bit of input. And then based on that input, we developed the priorities that you see starting on page 124.
Okay.
I have provided these to the board even prior to this meeting, so folks could begin to look at it, provide additional input. And I didn't hear any feedback on that. And so I'm just going to talk through these priorities, and you'll notice that the big difference between the original set and what you're looking at right now is just level of detail. Some of that based on feedback from the board, and some of that because in between these two documents, I have attended any number of, I guess, meetings or conferences where these topics have been discussed. And so I've been able to add to the bucket of information that I'm drawing from. So the first thing that we'd be advocating for is to fully fund public education. Statewide, the price tag on that's about $21 billion by the time you include the money needed for basic allotment, as well as other adjustments to areas that are being underfunded, up to and including transportation, safety, special education, and then they've needed to adjust the cost of education index for some time. I'm not listed on this document, but what might be interesting, well, it is. It's actually, so if you look under transportation, third bullet point, we've been underfunded in transportation by more than $13 million in the last 5 years. And that doesn't include just like the 50% increase to fuel costs. That's just the cost of doing business in transportation. And so when you look at some of these numbers, it really takes, if you take what we're talking about in terms of funding on legislative priorities and you marry that with what we just heard in our audit report, that it is a hats off moment for Wesley and his staff, the way they've been able to manage our money. And frankly, it's a moment to recognize the very prudent financial leadership of this board in knowing how much risk to take without taking too much in leveraging the district. But you can see here that we're advocating for a basic allotment of $7,570. That would be up from $6,160. And I actually feel that number is fairly conservative, but that's the number that when I talk to colleagues around the state, most of us are kind of hovering around. We think funding should be based on enrollment instead of percentage of attendance. Ms. Watts highlighted the reason why in her discussion with Wesley earlier. 96% of the kids may show up, but we have to staff for 100. And so it's a kind of nonsensical way to think about it. There's a significant budget shortfall or difference between 100% attendance funding and funding based on ADA. I already mentioned cost of education index. And then they need to fully fund safety, special education, and other groups. We're underfunded by $5.7 million in special education right now. We're underfunded by about 200% in safety requirements right now. And most of these are the results of mandates from the state. We didn't take this on because we were looking for excuses to spend money. They're good ideas. Don't hear me wrong. But the state mandated to us some ways that we have to handle these things and then funded us at about 50% of the cost associated therewith. Even if we were fully funded, I think we would struggle to find teachers because of how many have left the profession. And so we would also be prioritizing the need to promote growth in the teaching workforce. We would like them to provide sufficient resource to attract and retain teachers. That's obviously a funding issue. We need them to work on certification programs and exam fees. We feel like we could add no less than 22 staff members if we had this kind of help based on conversations we've had with folks in our own district who are trying to seek certification. We need additional funding for SPED to support not just teacher stipends, but also paraprofessional pay. That we think that needs to be carved out as a standalone item. And then incentives for certified teachers to return and allow TRS retirees to be rehired without the impact of the penalty. I was talking to our Education Foundation board this morning, and I've said this around the office a few times. I would love it if the state would consider an idea where if a teacher's not been teaching in the last 12 months and they left their previous district on good standing and they have an active certificate, that the state would give them a one-time payment of $10,000 to come back to the profession. It was very, very, very difficult during COVID. It has gotten somewhat better, and I think we ought to try and attract people back into the profession and say, y'all, it's, you know, things are getting better. They are. It's difficult, but things are getting better. And so ideas like that, I know that's a lot of money, but I would like to see them consider something along those lines.
Well, people are getting, as we mentioned previously, they're getting paid to help teachers leave.
Yeah,
And find
that's
other
exactly
careers,
right.
so we need to fight back.
And then the last one is really a discussion about the use of public funds in non-public schools. Vouchers, ESAs, the last thing I heard them called was grants. They've used a number of different names. The one thing that the governor actually doesn't say is the word voucher because he knows people are against it. However, we do believe that if we're going to have a voucher program, first of all, we are opposed to vouchers, and that if we have to have a voucher program, it should at least be one that acknowledges two things. And one is that it would be the single largest entitlement program that we've probably seen in the history of the nation. In that, we'd be giving money to people with no accountability for how they spend it, and there'd be no accountability for the results gleaned as a result of the work garnered by those grants. That's just not conservative. I don't think it fits what I would call traditional Texas values, that we have a tax and spend program, which is what the voucher program would be. And it is absolutely unaffordable. Even if you look at the latest numbers from the comptroller, the amount of money that Texas is making in excess of budget's decreasing, and we're actually seeing a drop in sales tax compared to this time last year. And so we're running out of revenue largely due to tax compression. It's not that the state of Texas is doing poorly economically, but tax compression is drawing down the coffers of the state budget. And they're doing that while at the same time talking about taking on one of the most expensive programs that we've seen in the United States. And if you question me saying that, I point you to the history of Arizona and Wisconsin, and we didn't list it here, but you could have also said Florida, which are running their state budgets in the ground because they can actually afford to pay for the vouchers that they promised people they would have. At a minimum, there should be fair competition. So if we're going to talk about a program that allows monies to be used in non-public schools, that competition should be held accountable for the same things public schools are held accountable in terms of students accepted and performance that's tracked. And so if we're going to call it competition, then let's understand that any competition that exists in a system where both sides don't have an equal opportunity to be successful is no longer competition. It's a misnomer. I was in a recent conversation where someone mentioned to me that allowing people to use private funds to go do something in school that they're not being held accountable for creates the same type of competitive imbalance that some conservatives are very upset about when it comes to transgender athletes playing in a different gender sport. It's analogous. Unequal competition is unequal competition. And so if they're going to have a voucher program, then I'll at least think about it in terms of competition, not whatever word they would use. And then on the back side of this, you can see just some very Midway specific information. In the last 5 years, I've mentioned this before, we're underfunded to the tune of 210% in security, 49% in fuel, 206% in property casualty, 50% in health insurance costs. We're underfunded in SPED to the tune of $5.7 million, all while Texas is sitting on $4.5 billion from the last biennium that they never allocated. You'll see in bold letters there, due to legislative inaction, those researchers never reached any schools. And so these would be the priorities that we think are representative of feedback we've received from the board and some work that we've done to try and bolster our understanding of what's going on around the state. There is an item on the consent agenda later for the board to formally adopt these legislative priorities. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions you have about the work that we've done to try and reflect what we think is direction that we've received from the board.
Comments from the board? Questions?
I just wanted to share with y'all that our colleagues across the state and my leadership brain trust has been talking about this a lot. And it seems a simple thing, but I wanted to affirm that what I'm hearing from these boards is that they're hitting the same number of main points, anywhere between 3 to 5, with 3 being a pretty popular number. So to keep it focused is a pretty popular thing to do, and that's a strategy that other districts are adopting as well.
This one's much easier to read also than the last one. I think it's easier on the eye.
Well done,
to find
Emily.
information.
That would be the work of Emily.
So now that they've started filing bills, are there any unexpected challenges that we need to, that would land on this document based upon proposed legislation?
There are going to be any number of bills that will be filed that I think could be problematic. What I think is that, so this is the world according to Chris Allen, informed a little bit by some strategists, okay? We need to have a focus on what it is we really want to advocate for. And there's 2 things that could happen as a result of that. And one is that we not get tripped up into chasing red herrings. And 2, there could be some things that get passed that are really distasteful for us, but it's going to take all the energy we have to deal with just getting schools fully funded and pushing back on vouchers. There are a number of bills being discussed that I think are very, very difficult for public schools in general. there have already been filings that I think are trying to politicize the independent school district process.
Do tell.
There's been a bill filed to make all elections and school boards partisan.
Yeah,
I've heard during the
I
November
heard,
election,
yeah.
them running primaries.
From our local representative?
I think it'll make elections less about what's going on in a school district and more about state and national politics, which I think is dangerous. Secondarily, I think it'll make elections become so expensive and combative that good people won't run. Which we're already seeing
Sure.
Yeah.
at the state and national level.
It's going to tear apart more boards than we have already that are dysfunctional as well, so.
Yeah, I mean, to Rick's point, I think there's probably some things that we should advocate for as well, as what's on the sheet. But I think that you're right, that, you know, we've got to figure out, you know, what's the big thing, right? Put first things first, right?
Yes.
Isn't that it's kind of a leader in me thing somewhere? And I think that for too many years, funding has been the thing that's always been pushed aside, you know, because of other stuff. And I don't think we can do that anymore. I think this has got to be the number one issue. So I will say that I'm glad that there's specifics in here. I love the fact that there's actual numbers that we're saying, we want this, we think it should be this, and pointing out, you know, all the deficiencies. I mean, $13 million in transportation funding over 5 years. How did that happen? I don't understand, you know? Are there mandates that they're not fulfilling, or is it just, gosh, the cost of gas and insurance is through the roof and we're just losing money hand over fist?
All of that.
All of the above?
And Ken could probably speak to this in depth if you'd like him to, but between insurance, fuel, personnel, the cost of a bus, oil, tires, all of it is just, we all see the reality of inflation in our home budgets.
Right.
And then you just take that and you spread that across 8,800 students, 11 campuses. Like, you can kind of conceptualize that any way you want. We run a small city, honestly. And so you just think about everything that a city does, we do that, and we have all the associated costs. And trying to do that in a way while expressing compassion to those who may not be able to necessarily care for themselves. So case in point, and I'm not trying to chase a rabbit trail here, but one of the things I'm concerned about is I have heard elected officials say that they are going to make teacher raises a priority, which I think they should. When they have done teacher raises in the past, they've done two things that I find concerning. And one is they will just put $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 into teacher salary. They won't change the funding stream, right? And so they'll fund it for 2 years, but then the third year after that decision, it becomes an unfunded mandate for school districts. So if they don't change the funding formula, then it's not sustainable, and it becomes another version of an unfunded mandate. The second thing that concerns me is when they say teacher raises, what they mean is nurses, librarians, counselors, and teachers, okay? And it's funny because I was thinking about this today while I was standing next to you, and I may call you out here for a second, but you and I stood next to a cafeteria worker at South Bosque Elementary School. She knew every kid by name.
Absolutely.
How many ran up to her and asked her for a hug?
Dozens and dozens.
And she knew their dietary needs.
She did.
And she knew exactly what was going on in the labs.
She knew
a bunch of
exactly
their
what
moms.
class they were in, so she knew this is the last third grade class to come through because this kid is in this class, absolutely.
If you don't think that the people serving our kids lunch are educators, you're not paying attention.
Right. They can't learn if they
So
don't.
you can't give raises like that if you're not including everybody who touches the life of a child. Bus driver, child nutrition worker, custodian, teachers, counselors, nurses, for sure, occupational therapists, speech therapists, all of those folks. If you're not thinking about all of them, you might as well not be thinking about any of them.
Right.
So the best way to do it is to run it through the formulas and let school districts determine how best to spend that money given the complexity of their individual school districts.
So my question was getting to for this is what, we have this great list of legislative priorities. What do we do with it?
Well, that's almost a topic for another discussion. What I'll tell you
Well,
is...
it can be if you need to.
I defer to our board president as to when we need to rein this in a little bit. But what I'll tell you is we have 3 or 4 different things that we're looking at doing. And what I tell you, one of my top priorities is to get these legislative priorities into hands of some of our key thinkers in our community. Again, I was talking to members of our Education Foundation today and shared some of this information with them. And they were asking, how can we help? What can we do? How can we be involved in emails, letter writing campaigns? One suggested going to Austin and advocating for Midway ISD with the elected officials, which should happen. They'll listen to parents faster than they'll listen to me.
Right.
They'll listen to you guys faster than they'll listen to me.
You think?
They were anxious to get copies of legislative priorities in their hands. And most of the folks who serve on our education foundation are business leaders in our community, and they know other people who do the same. And so it's about building strong voices around these topics and educating people on what the issues are. And help, like when I share this information with people, they're oftentimes dumbfounded. Like, how can we be 5.6 million in the hole in sped and these kinds of things? And it doesn't really matter how you feel about some of the political issues. These things, everyone I think agrees need to be addressed, regardless of what happens with the rest. Vouchers or no vouchers, you got to address these things, right? Yeah. And so, I think that's very energizing for folks. And I have some other strategies that I'm in the process of working on, and we'll be rolling out in the coming days and weeks.
Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it premature to talk about what Emily and Russ and I are working on?
No, I don't believe it is. It's
The agenda item is broad enough, Ms. Watts, I think.
Do you want to address that? Or yeah, because you've been more involved in this than I have.
Good evening, Board. I'm done filming you, so now I'll just talk with you. Pam and I have taken some time. We've done quite a bit of research, and we're working with Lorena ISD's board president to look at developing a regional, like Dr. Allen spoke about, a regional coalition of schools, but this being specific to school boards. So the Heart of Texas School Board Association, it would model what we see in other areas of the state that have advocated for many more years than we have for their regions and the things that they need specific, such as the North Texas Association of School Boards, the Central Texas School Board Association. There's another in East Texas, or San Antonio has their own, it's Bexar County. And so we would be looking at the Heart of Texas School Board Association would be a formal organization that would encompass representation from all of the school boards in Region 12, the McLennan County area. So whether you're a small district, to your larger Waco district, what that looks like, and y'all come together as elected officials to talk about the things that affect us here that maybe are different than, say, Region 13, which is our neighbor, or, Region 10 in other parts of the state. So they've reached out to, Pam and I have worked to reach out to the association mentor with TASB that will help us identify what ways we can go about that. We've got our first interest letter drafted to send out to those boards. Pam, what would you like to add to that?
Well, I think it's noteworthy that this is already going on in the state, around the state. It's just that up until now, we have not had this organization for Region 12. So that's Waco, Belton, Temple, Killeen, and that's 80 districts, and that encompasses Axtell and Moody and Golson and Midway and Waco and Killeen. So when you get 80 collective voices together, we can make more noise than a single district by itself. And legislative priorities, I believe, is one of the focuses of all these different regional associations. But it's not so unwieldy as trying to get consensus of all Texas school boards. So Emily was instrumental in drafting the bylaws and founding the Central Texas School Board Association.
Yes,
if I remember correctly. So she's got a lot of history. We're not reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of great models, a lot of support. Have reached out to a number of people who are leading the other regional organizations. So we've got a really, really good template. We just need to get an interest letter out and reach out to 80 different school boards. And then, but you meet just a few times a year, it's a big machine to get just a much louder voice.
So is there a, that's a big area to cover. Is there any reason you wouldn't just base it on McLennan County? Have a more concise group? Because we have some synergy in that realm already in a couple different ways.
Modeling what's already been proved successful around the state, I think they're doing it by region. That seems to work well.
Yeah. there's just those regions are arbitrary in some ways that don't always align. But hey, I get it. So.
Well, that's a good point.
One thing that I'll speak to on that is we discussed that and actually choosing what could potentially be the name, the Heart of Texas School Board Association versus Region 12 School Board Association. If a board opts not to join, then they don't have to. If they're not in Region 12, but they're close enough to us that they may want to join us rather than, say, somewhere in North Texas or down in the Central Texas area, they could still join. So it gives some flexibility there. We would focus on Region 12, just given that we all are geographically located together, but the option is there for a yes or no. To take part, to have your voice as much or as little as you want. So it really would be dependent on each board, and there's no pressure.
Yeah.
So who's in the Central Texas?
Austin, Leander, Pflugerville.
So it's further south.
Yeah,
okay.
further
I don't
south.
think of
You'd
that
think,
Texas.
you know, when I
Yeah.
heard Central Texas, I
That
thought,
would
why
be
aren't
us.
why aren't
Yeah.
we members of that?
Yeah.
And it's farther south. And that's part to your point too, is that we've got a lot of Texas that's underrepresented in this respect, and I would rather be more inclusive rather than less so, because I think you can still reach consensus on a lot of important things.
In the vein of Dr. Allen's comments about folks in the House and the Senate, Texas, not Congress, listening more to people besides superintendents, I think that sort of group could have a much more powerful voice, particularly if that group, I appreciate that TASB's a great resource in a lot of regards and everything, but TASB's, they're not going to listen to people from TASB, and TASB's already been labeled, whether accurately or not, and having a group that is not created by, not run by, not tied to TASB in any way, speaking on issues, I think could be a much more powerful voice.
Unfortunately, they've been painted with the most unpleasant brush, and it's not fair, but.
Now, like I say, accurately or inaccurately, that's what's been hung around their neck.
Yes.
What's the fee? What is there a fee to join, or is it?
We're working through all that. There's a minimum dollar amount it's very, very nominal, like $5. It's very small. So we could even set it up a different way that would not include fees. It just depends on the way that the group wants to go. So the stage that we're at now with the Heart of Texas School Board Association would be getting interest from the boards and then determining which route we go. Looking at a coalition similar to what Dr. Allen was discussing, which would be more local, would branch out to include businesses, et cetera. That would be, something that I think as a board, us as a group doing legislative work and advocacy work would come together to decide that. That group would tend to lean more toward the having opportunities for advertising, for advocacy, for speaking up, traveling, things like that. To Mr. Russick's point that the legislators are going to listen to those groups. The School Board Association can be a resource to that group to teach advocacy, to teach the points that are important, and to let them get them the talking points and the effects on their individual districts or their individual classrooms.
I mean, I think one of the things that interests me as I've listened to this, and I knew you guys were working on some of this, but if you think about 80 districts, the Region 12 area, I don't know the map well enough to know, but it's got to be at least 6 or 8, maybe a dozen different members of the state Texas House that represent those areas. And there's at least probably 3 or 4 senators.
Knowing who our representatives are.
Yeah, so
yeah.
There, I think what it means is that we would have not just the ability to get the ear of 1 or 2 representatives in McLennan County, but if this group is focused enough to agree on some really, really concrete things, there's a lot more doors it could open potentially.
Yeah.
And even both parties potentially. I mean, you may even find places where there's people on the other side of the aisle who might be listening to some of those issues too, potentially.
If y'all are interested, going forward, we've got the website links for all of the associations that are online. I can make sure we get those out so y'all can take a look and see what everybody else is doing.
I think it's a good idea.
Well, thank you. We do too.
Thank you, Emily. Other questions or comments from the board? Didn't mean to cut anybody off. All right.
you, Emily.
So further comments or discussions on the items that are in the board packet? As Dr. Allen said, we've got that on the consent agenda for the board to potentially approve moving forward with. But I didn't want to stop any further questions or comments the board might have on those.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm just saying you've done a lot of work with this, so let's make sure we get out and publicize it.
Yes, ma'am.
I would say one other thing, and I know Rick and I have had this conversation too, and I think that while it's fine for me as a board member, other board members, even our board as a board to say we oppose vouchers, I think that it's, in my opinion, probably more important to not just say you oppose vouchers, but instead to go those next steps and talk about the things that you talked about, Chris, and emphasize it's not just opposition to vouchers, it's opposition to taxpayer dollars going where there's no accountability, no requirement that they take all kids. There is no competition because the playing field is not level, and hammer on those points as opposed to just a blanket, I oppose vouchers. Because I think the lay of the land is not favorable to defeat vouchers' broad picture. I hope that what we get out of it is if there's going to be something passed there, just like we have strings tied to so much of the dollars we get, there would be strings tied to those dollars, and actually maybe some rules where saying that it's good competition is not unfair. So my comments. Consideration items. Consent agenda, we have minutes from our October board meeting, a number of early graduation requests, the budget amendments that Wesley referenced, our legislative priorities that we just talked about, and then the annual financial audit report that Clayton presented. Any board member wish to remove any item from the consent agenda? If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Motion by Mr. Tullis,
Second?
second by Ms. Watts. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Cast our votes for the McLennan Central Appraisal District for 2025. Y'all got the info in the board packet there. Unless there's questions or discussion, I'm going to just go ahead and move that we cast all of our votes for our nominee, Mr. Green.
Second.
Second that.
All right. Motion by Mr. Russick, second by Mr. Witt. And the reason being, if you look at how the votes have already been cast, the city of Waco's already cast theirs, Waco ISD has cast theirs, MCC has. So there's still us and the county is the big items outstanding. I think Ms. Watkins has enough votes along with others she'll get from other school districts who don't have to go early like we do, that she'll be assured of a place. The city councilman from Waco's already in. Mr. Patton from the Waco ISD board is in. I'm sure the county will elect Ben Perry. So I think that'll solidify the 5 that the taxing entities represent. So, comments or discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Personnel.
Thank you again to Mr. Green
Thank you,
for starting.
Jonathan. Yes, for doing that. Thank you.
He gets paid double what he gets paid here.
It's awesome.
You have an addendum at your seats. There is no action that needs to be taken on any recommendations this evening.
Great.
Very good. And we have nothing for closed session on personnel, or is it on personnel?
One item on personnel, sir.
Okay, not students.
No, sir.
All right, so Superintendent's Communications.
I will be brief, but it's interesting to me, and it may be interesting to you, that Thanksgiving holiday has its roots in one of our country's most bittersweet moments of division. On October 3rd of 1863, President Lincoln issued a Thanksgiving Day proclamation that helped unite a war-weary nation. Lincoln was not the first president to issue a Thanksgiving proclamation, but his order did set that to occur the last Thursday of November, the last Thursday in November as Thanksgiving. Interestingly enough, in 1939, the last Thursday in November fell on the last day of the month, which created a shortened holiday shopping season. This created an issue for the country because, as you all know, in 1939 we were coming out of the Great Depression. And so Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued a presidential proclamation moving Thanksgiving to the last Thursday in November. And then in 1941, Congress passed a law establishing that it be the fourth Thursday in November as a federal holiday. And what is interesting to me about that is when you look at the history of the Thanksgiving holiday, that it was set in November as we know it today, coming out of a very, very divisive time known as the Civil War, and that it was adjusted due to the need to be concerned about our country's financial status. And I think it's worth taking time to just pause and consider the fact that as we go into this Thanksgiving holiday, that no matter what the strife has been that our country has faced, whether it be unprecedented challenges related to politics or society or issues associated with the economy, that when times have been tough, we've always taken a moment to stop and give thanks for all the things that are going well. And so I thought that with this being the November board meeting, it would be worth taking my time during superintendent comments to just give that charge to everyone, that as we go into this time, and we, I don't know, what do we cut, 3 or 4 days now from getting out here for a week? I'm looking at my people, they're all nodding yes. So, man, there's a lot going on, but if we don't take a moment and just be thankful for all the things that are going well, it'll be easy to let that continue to be sources of difficulty, instead of realizing, boy, there's a lot to be thankful and hopeful and proud of. You haven't had a great day till you've served 600 kids Thanksgiving dinner. It's great. It reminds you of why we do this work. Man, it's great. So that's all I have, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Well said. So at 8:25, we'll go into closed session under 551.074. Ready, Britt?